Hello, my name is Sophia Bridge, and I am the author of Freedom from the Unconscious. And today I want to hopefully bring a perspective from both consciousness and spirituality to the Israeli Hamas war that's going on right now. The conflict has been going on for very much longer than just the recent past. And but in that, I have done some research and looked at the prominent people who have opinions, on the subject, and looking at the history, of it. And I think it's been hard for me to say anything really before this, both processing my thoughts from my own understanding, my own spiritual perspective, and so I'm going to try my best to sort of uh, put it in the framework of, I guess within, say from the framework that I've established, in my book, and from, my understanding of, things that probably aren't in that particular book, but probably will come in my second book. And so it's just really hard to process it all because, as you can see by the degree behind me, I received my master's degree in interreligious studies from Claremont School of Theology. And in that, my main focus was Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. I also took classes in Jain, Sikhism, Buddhism, and Hinduism. And so I have read the sacred text of all the major religions, in the world. And so I feel like I have a pretty good, understanding. While at Claremont, I also took classes in peace building and mediation. And so I feel like I have a good skill set to come, to maybe give some, insight, but it is not a easy, I mean, there's no real quick, solution because of the fact that it's really multi-layered. I mean, it's really multi-layered. Um, but I do feel like I have a pretty good understanding, both of the, of the concepts and the history and, of the conflict. And so this is, I guess, where I would like to start. I see what's written in the sacred texts like the Torah, the New Testament, and the Quran. And in the Bhagavad Gita, as I my previous video mentioned. And so, and there's, I guess, let's address the concept of, war, and what is a good reason to go to, war over maybe spiritual reasoning, Um, and as the Bhagavad Gita states, I mean, it really takes a lot of very deep wisdom and understanding that, really very few people have, to be able to decide when is the right time, to go to war and when do you fight, And, and I think that what is surprising to me is why, in the Quran, it would make statements that that it is okay, or permitted to kill unbelievers, right? Or doing things in defense of God. And I would understand that in essence from the perspective of the Bhagavad Gita if it's coming from people of deep wisdom. But because the Quran is presented and taught to many people who are not of deep wisdom and in many cases are very ignorant and very uneducated, and absent of that wisdom to make those calls. Like, why would you even say that? That's, part of me is like, why would such a highly spiritual person really say those types of things, because I would think that this type of person would understand the structure of the universe, how God created us, and how we move through this process of the development of consciousness. And thereby knowing that people of severely low consciousness, aren't really able to see, out beyond, in essence, hopelessness, shame, guilt, anger, that drives a very negative outlook or life viewpoint. So I think that, and I've got a text here. Um, yeah. So, sorry for the interruption, but the issue is that I lost my train of thought now. But anyway, um, so why someone who is very so highly spiritually enlightened as Muhammad, and even like, and I'm gonna say Jesus would say things, really criticizing, the Jewish people, in the, as was commented, in the New Testament, like why would someone who was so highly spiritual, and I would assume that would understand how God created people, the human experience, the evolution of consciousness, and the process of which that occurs, and how God has structured the world, as I mentioned in my book, with 80% of the people of a consciousness that is destructive to life, and 20% of humanity with a consciousness that it is creative and therefore positive contribution to life in the world. So I would have thought that um, you know, because those comments and those statements, if in fact they said them, because remember, neither Muhammad nor Jesus actually wrote anything down. So what we're seeing written in these texts is what somebody else wrote or said they said. The reality is we don't really know they said it, because I would find it very odd. I mean, so we don't really know they said it, and the issue is like, what if someone included that? How did it serve them and their cause and the promotion of each individual religion? So you have Christianity that's trying to establish itself a separate identity from Judaism. Because initially when Christianity sort of started to form, it really required people at the very beginning to convert to Judaism. There wasn't really an intent to create a separate, religion from Judaism. It was trying to sort of reform, Judaism, at the time. And so, because that didn't happen, and it seemed, people having to comply with all the precepts of the Torah, and all the requirements that needed to do and to be an observant Jew, then it was really taxing on those who were converting. And so they were like, well, let's make this easier. Let's trim it down, make it simple, make the requirements a lot less, and this way maybe more people will try to follow the message of Jesus. This is fundamentally and very simply what happened at the very beginning, and this is how then Christianity becomes its own separate religion. But prior to that, again, I'm going to restate that they asked people to convert. People were converted to Judaism at the very beginning, and because that was just so much in having to be observant, that they split off and then started to make it simpler, to try to follow the teachings of Jesus himself. Okay, so in the creation of the writing of the Quran, this is why you have fights between the Sunni and the Shiite groups of Muslims, because they all have different interpretations of the Quran itself, and so even within themselves argue about who was in charge and some of the interpretations, of it. So I do think that, and knowing how humans are, let's be real, because even, in these current times, we don't really trust, so much our authorities, and that they're always telling us the truth. Even the writing down of what, these highly spiritual people said, is open to editing. Let's put it that way. Open to editing. And so, therefore, people may have added that, maybe have added it. Maybe it wasn't in there. Maybe somebody else wanted that. We don't really know. We don't really know. And I don't think anybody who's alive today, or maybe ever now, would really know. So because God in the end is love, and God is joy, and God is abundance, and God is consciousness. And so, that being said, it is just really difficult for me to say that, to accept that God would tell someone that for a document, or for, like something to be communicated to people that were of low consciousness, because most of humanity is that, would give them that kind of instruction to just use. And sorry. Okay. So um so I think that, because really those comments, in, both in the Quran, is what's really causing, the cause of this huge, this destruction. It's a really big part of it. It's a big part of it. Um, so that's one. The other is that, there's also, anti-Semitism that was created against the Jews because of what was written in the New Testament. So I think that, that needs to be acknowledged and understood. And then there's some psychology I want to add to this, because I think there's a spiritual part, and there's the psychology part. And I think that, we are spiritual beings, and we have intuition, and we have, like, I guess intuition, and then we have our mind, and the mind is a receptor for consciousness, or a process of consciousness, and it also is a physical part. It's a physical, organ. The brain is a physical organ that, and the psyche that gets developed, is, just something that is part of the physical world. So a physical world material like the brain is needed in order to have consciousness. And so those two things work together. And so let's talk about the psychological part, which I consider to be more the, physical world perspective. Is that, um, we have trauma, we have learned behavior, we have, the evolution of the psyche. That you could say the evolution of the soul is represented by the evolution of the psyche. And so, everyone comes in. If people would read my book, it's really helpful. Come in, and, because I do believe in reincarnation, that we reincarnate multiple times to master the human experience, to develop, higher consciousness in the instinctual drives. And this takes many lifetimes to do. Now, the power instinct is an instinctual drive. And so that's kind of what you also see at play here, And, but I think that trauma plays a role, in this. We think, passed on trauma from one generation to another, is, exist here. And so, that also is at play, I think people maturity levels, and sophistication, and mental capacity, all play a role in how this, conflict plays out. And so, I think that it's really important to, understand that, all you have the spiritual aspect, the religion from the text. This is what the text says. And, I'm going to have to say this, even in the, I've seen the prophecies, made, in I guess in the Hebrew Bible, but I'm not, for me, I don't really, for me, it doesn't have significance. And I'm going to tell you why. Um, I think it's a story. I think it's a story or a prophecy that probably will come to pass. However, it has to do with unconscious people. If you continue to live your life in an unconscious way, and just without knowing, make changes in your life or not, very slowly, along with the collective, both community and world, and you move through that process. I said, they then I think the prophecy applies, and you may be interested in doing that. Now, do you have to go along with the collective? No. Do you have to go along the process? Does your soul need to reincarnate another 1,000 times over 8,000 years until we get to the end? No. No, it doesn't. And so and that's what I'm proposing, in my book, is information and guidance. And I think, and I'm working on a second book that gives a more detailed, description, like how to. I said, like, how to get through this transformational process that we're in order to complete that transformation, to return to God, you could say to heaven, and not have to return to this earth. And so, and once you're reunited with God in complete and total oneness, it's complete bliss, right? So one of the things that, where I'm at right now is that I didn't know, when, like, as if you read my book, is that one of the major things I had when I was little was that, I was very interested in getting back to God. That was a very big primary focus of myself, for myself. But I thought, because I initially grew up Catholic, is that you died and went to heaven, right? So I wanted to know, well, what do I need to do to get there, right? What I didn't know is that you can experience God and achieve oneness with God while being here on earth. And in that, you become a channel for the light. You become a vessel of which to draw down the energy of God, the Creator, into this world. And in order to lift the world up. And I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know that was the point of it. So that's why I'm sharing it with, you here today. If you didn't know it, there it is, is that that's what you're meant to do. Become a vessel, to become a channel of the light, so that the energy of God, flows through you and outward to enrich the lives of everybody around you just through your energy. So people think it's about action. And people think it's like, oh, what do I need to do? You don't need to do anything except transform yourself and master the human process. And through that, develop that connection to the Creator, to God, so that it flows through you. And then when you walk into a room, you can share that light. The issue is, I'm going to tell you, is that my experience has been is that I am a trigger for people. That people sense the different energy, people sense it, and they're not really sure what it is. And a lot of people who are not awakened, and maybe who are carrying a lot of shame, who are maybe deeply unconscious and want to stay that way, try to avoid the negative aspects of themselves, and have created a very hard and fast defense mechanism to avoid those negative aspects of themselves. My presence is very triggering. It makes them very uncomfortable. Some people won't like me. And so just because you become, start to in your essence starts to sort of become a channel, for the divine energy, doesn't mean your life is going to necessarily be easier. Or that everybody's going to be like, oh, great, that's so wonderful. I just want to know, how you did it, and how can I do it myself, and is that a thing? No, you're going to initially find people, well, everybody doesn't want to hear it. So anyway, but So here I am, I guess, trying to be a channel of that light to everyone. And I'm just going to tell you what it is true. And I know what, I'm wondering if what needs to go away is traditional religion. Maybe the books need to go away because they say the mysticism, right? Is really what I'm talking about. Your connection to God through oneness with the creator of the universe and being that channel of divine energy is what I consider to be mysticism. And in mysticism, all the different paths unite into the same rules. So if you get a Sufi, if you get a Kabbalist, if you get a Hindu, if we're really, I would say Jain and Sikh, tend to follow, or a Buddhist, we're saying high levels of Buddhism and high, not, we're talking about gurus, people have reached, real ones that have reached that level, not who claim it, but maybe aren't in, but, uh, have actually reached those really high levels and have experienced oneness. Or transcending what a lot of people call the self. There's some famous people you might know, like the Ram Dass, who was a professor at Harvard, right? He's one. You have very popular one, I guess, right now, Sagha Guru. You've had the Maharaji. I mean, there have been many, Indian mystics. You have the Ari, in Kabbalah. Um, there are many very high level Buddhist spiritual people that I'm not, their names are not coming to me, but I know that maybe I'll create a video in that and I'll talk about some where I'll list them out so that if you're interested in reading more about them, you can do so. I could also provide books that they've written and lectures that they've given and direct you to more of the information to see that there are many people who are, you could say, transcended to those levels of consciousness. And you could probably consider all in one category, no matter their predominant religious or spiritual practice, in mysticism. So in the spiritual mystic world, it all converges into the same, because in the end, God is the same, the creator of the universe is the same, and the rules of the universe are the same for everyone. So that being said, some of the things written in these books are sort of, guides, and maybe there were guides up until now. Because we have experienced an increase in consciousness in humanity, but a very slight one. The work by Dr. David Hawkins, in a lecture, he mentioned that, we went from maybe 196 to 209 or 207 in consciousness level in 1990 in the world. And so this went, again, from a overall destructive consciousness, in the world to going over 200, which would make it into creative. So, but slightly over, and it just happened. So I think everybody feels the energy. People feel the shift and think, oh gosh, everything is going to be great and everything should just be perfect now. Well, no, it's not. Because you have to unlearn and unwind the past and heal. That's where right now there's a lot of focus on healing. And we're about healing trauma. And this is where the psychology part comes in. Trauma is also held, the memories of past life trauma and current life trauma are held in the body. And this is why massage therapy and breathing and yoga and those types of things are also, and meditation are very good healing practices. And we're in that part because as we transcend, we need to heal from the past, and I think this is where we're at. So that's what I would suggest, that we would to do healing, that we're in a new era, and maybe those books don't really apply anymore. Oh my God, that's the shock. Now that being said, I just want to say that let me see where I'm at. 24 minutes. That being said, I do want to say that one of the unique aspects of the Torah is that it really depicts the journey, you could say, of the soul and the development of the psyche into the consciousness, which is Israel. So, Israel at this point is like a physical land, but it's primarily a state of consciousness. People might call this Buddha consciousness, Jesus Christ consciousness, uh, um, but I would also say, that And so I would say, that it would be that the conscious level of Israel, because it indicates how Jacob went with his battle, with the angel of death, transcends that aspect and wins that battle, which signifies our battle with our negative side and our programming of which we entered this world into this higher state of consciousness. And in that, because he won the battle, just as much as Jesus was tempted in the desert by Satan, very similar, is that then he transcended, and did not fall into the temptation, and therefore reached his higher level of consciousness. So Jacob's name is then changed to Israel, and it's a representative of a state of consciousness just as much as the other. Um, so I think that's kind of what so what was I going to say? Evil does exist, and it is always going to exist. And part of our lesson as we come into this world is to learn how to be good and have a positive outlook in life and feel joyful and feel happy, and to connect to God, being here and become a vessel of to become a vessel and a channel of the light into this world. Um, those are our goals, right? Um, and the more and more of us that can do that, the more and more we help the world. So is it really going there and having a solution exactly? And is it, that, whether we do this tactic or that tactic or have this policy or that policy, it really has to come from within. It has to come from within. And I'm going to say this: God loves everyone. God wants life to be abundant, joyful, and filled with love for every single person. So to me, it doesn't matter what was written, where, in what book, you know. The reality is that you need, each individual person has to understand that God only wants abundant and love for you. And I think in my second book, and maybe I should do it in a video, I'll explain how you were created, programmed by God in a very specific way, in a very limited way, to not know everything. And He created each one of us different, and we all know a little bit different aspect of God, a little bit different. And and that is where our conflicts with each other bring in greater consciousness and greater awareness of who we are and who the other person is. So, so part of it is like, when people say about to get out of the matrix and that this world is an illusion, and it sort of is, I mean, well, it is, but because you were created in a limited aspect. You just don't know how limited it was, and then there are all different ways that different people were created and looked at things. I mean, we kind of sort of see it like you have people who are artists, you have people who are academics, like professors and teachers. You have people who are want to be doctors. You have people who are business people. You have people who are what we call the service professions, like nurses, police officers, medics. Then you have warriors that, like in the military, we have warriors, and then you have priests, and you have the religious. Some people who are very geared towards religion. Then we have people who are leaders. And so each one of us has a role, and in that, this world, did you think that that just came to you? No, God said you're going to be the leader. God said to this other one, you will be the service person. God said you'll be the artist, and you'll be the teacher, and you'll be the religious leader. God determined who was going to be what. And then it starts the game of life, and it is your soul's journey. He created you there, and I'm going to go into this, like I said, in another, because it's going to get really long. Anyway, I'm getting off track. But anyway, I just want you to understand that we were all created in a very limited way, and because of that, our perception is limited, and we perceive things and think, oh, life is like this, and this means this, and this. Well, it doesn't necessarily like that, and it doesn't necessarily mean that, and things aren't. You come to conclusions that aren't really true. Now, based on your experience, because of how you were created, you will continue to have very similar experience, and then you say, based on these similar experiences you have, you say, oh, the world is like this. But there's somebody else who has the complete opposite experience of you, who's also come to the conclusion from their life experience that it's completely functions completely opposite to the way you think it does. And this is the issue here. And this is where interacting with many people from many different perspectives helps you to come really understand the fullness of God's creation. And that's the beauty of it, the fullness of God's creation. And when you're your authentic self, you have to be your authentic self, which means you have to be the part or the aspect that God created you to be. It doesn't mean that, oh, I'm a singer and I am, a professor at Ivy League school, and I'm also make millions of dollars, and I'm super beautiful, and I can also do brain surgery as well as be in the military, and no, it's not saying that you're going to be all things. Each person is mastery of their who they are. And then you have to respect and appreciate, oh, that person's, that's who they are. This is who you are. Your only thing you need to do is be the best and master the human experience and be the best and authentic version of who you are, because you're that aspect of the light. You're the aspect of God, right? That. And you shouldn't say, oh, I want to be that one. I really rather be the artist if you're the intellectual. No, I want that. Or if you're the artist, like, God, I wish I was really a lot smarter. You know what I'm saying? And be the intellectual, but that's not your role. You shouldn't be jealous or envy everybody else's path and what they're doing. And that's why you have to own yourself. And once you do that, you're going to be much happier, and it's going to get you connected to God. It's one of the things. So I'm just trying to give a little tidbit so you can kind of know, and I know it's probably all over the place because, I'm very familiar with all this stuff, and I've been through this process. So, it's hard for me to sort of bring it down to like snippets of 15 minutes or 30 minutes or even an hour, so it's really hard. And since it's so much, I just try to hit the highlights. So if you have questions, you can put it in the comments, and hopefully I'll have more videos to explain it. But I just kind of touch on things to kind of give you guys a feel of, of what's out there, and what's been part of my process, So all I want to say is this: is that remember, God loves you, and He wants the best happiness for everybody, joy for everyone, and He doesn't really want to see us fighting, but understands that sometimes it happens because we were created limited. But the point in the conflict is to learn that, oh my gosh, you're this aspect, I'm this aspect. And you might want to learn that some of the people who wrote these things, they lied to meet their own needs. So we're just talking about, you talk about power and corruption of power. I mean, you want to think it's just, say, leaders in government and, organizations or businesses or corporations, things like that. It's not that. How about the abuse of power that went in whoever wrote those texts and edited them? Do we know that's what was really said? Do we know that was exactly how it came out? Because none of the individuals, like in particular, Jesus and, say Muhammad, they didn't actually write down their own teachings. Oh, I know the other thing I was going to mention earlier about the psychology part is that because of this limited perspective, we all filter and understand the world through our own limited perspective. And in that, when you played that game when you're in school that you tell somebody something and they're supposed to tell everybody in the ear and go around in a circle, and it comes back and the last person then says what the other person told him and how it changes. And also about witnesses, how no two witnesses ever see the same thing or the same incident, even though they could have been standing next to each other, and they don't report the same thing. And that's kind of what I see, is that, the Quran was put together and the New Testament was put together by various people who saw things in different ways, who may have heard it and interpreted it in different ways. And there may just be some stuff they just dadgum made up. They just made up because it furthered the cause. So I really think you need to look at, when you look at the abuse of power, you need to look at who edited and wrote the New Testament and the Quran, because there's a lot of stuff there. You know what I'm saying? You know, and in the Torah, what I want to say about that is about, like the prophecies and things like that. You have to ask yourself, maybe those things, maybe there is some things there, it'll end up that way. Okay, well, why? But this is about if you're still here in that process, when all that goes down, you've been here too long. You don't have to be here. You don't have to go through all that. That's what I just keep telling you. You can, if you follow the stuff, like I told you, in my book, and I'm going to write another one, but there's a lot of stuff out there that you can follow. There's a lot of sources, it's, but, I can only attest to what's worked, for me, and I also want to say that, my principal form of study is Kabbalah. I grew up Catholic, but my main spiritual practice is Kabbalah, and so and I highly recommend that. I highly recommend it to people because it has worked for me. So I can only speak to what's worked for me, but I know a lot of other people have done got other have for instance if they're Hindu and those types of things, so or Buddhist. So so in that I just want to say that you don't have to be here through that, and you don't have to go through all the suffering and conflict and wars and death and suffering and famine and everything that's going to come through until we get to the end. You don't have to. Do the work. Do the inner work. Do the inner work. Become a channel of the light, a vessel for the energy of God to bring it into this world. And then when you do that, and if enough of us do it, it will change the vibration of this earth. It will elevate the consciousness of this earth. So then even people who aren't so enlightened will feel it. And it will begin to change them to the path of consciousness and bring them to a path, of develop, more aware, intent, with intention to follow the path, the development of consciousness with intention, and awareness. So I think that's really kind of where I'm at. I mean, the solution of like who was here first, and we can't play that who was here first stuff because or here who was here the longest, because then you'd have everybody in the world fighting, because there's a lot of movement throughout the time, throughout history. And, we could say here in the United States, Native Americans might want to get rid of everybody else who's here. Everybody. Because if you're not a Native American or have Native American blood in you, you obviously don't belong. So if you want to, go down that road, we could get rid of probably about, 330 some odd million people here. But that's not really the point. That's, I just want to say that's the point, is that it's not the point. There are people who have been conquered, and there is a war, and sometimes you lose, and then you have to submit to the winner. You got to accept your loss, and you submit to the winner, and then you try to cooperate and adapt to the lead culture. Is it easy? No. Is it favorable? No. But that's like the physical world part. There's a physical world part to that. Like, oh, this and this, and you have to listen to them, and I'll follow their rules, and I can't live the way I do. And in the end, it's like part of the physical world things you have to do, but then the spiritual part is like, well, okay, it doesn't really matter. Because if you do the inner work, if you look at your negative aspects and try to transcend and peel away the layers after layer of layer until you become a purified vessel so that you could be a channel of the light, none of that matters. And you're going to find when you really get to those high levels, and I don't necessarily say that I'm there yet, but when you get to really, get to those high levels, nobody's going to touch you. Nobody's going to touch you. You will have peace and you will have protection, And what's really interesting, there was a rabbi, and I'll have to look it up in the name, and I'll post, I guess I can, in another video, tell you about it. But I know there's a story of a rabbi who got, captured, by the Nazis. And and no, and from all we know about the Nazis and how Jewish people are treated, this particular rabbi, was kept safe. He was allowed to. He never went. I don't think he went to a camp, or where he was able to practice Judaism, which was not allowed by others. He was able to, I guess, minister, maybe is the word, to other people that were around him that were Jewish, and in the end of the war, he was released. you know and I think that's the purity that you need to understand, is that when you're really there and connected to the light and feel, cause, and have that energy and that love for God, then you're going to realize even evil people aren't going to touch you. Even evil people are not going to touch you. So we can get there. You can get there, you know. And is it hard? Oh, it sure is. I mean, it is gonna it's it could break you. I'm not gonna lie. It's hard. The tests are hard. Looking at your ego being broken and having other people break your ego, is not easy. It's hard. And at some point you will think, oh, I can't do it anymore. It's too much. And you'll want to say, I give up. I just give up. This is just too much. But the issue is that, it's probably just right when you're being ready to go to the next level. And I know this is really hard to understand for a lot of people who are not, spiritual, and certainly have not read my book. And even reading my book may still not get it. But be easy on yourself and keep reading the book. Keep reading the book. Keep reading the book. Keep looking. There are many videos too on YouTube, But and I'm gonna write another book because I find people saying, "Oh, people talk about, but how exactly do you get there?" So all I'm gonna do is write the book, my next book, on how I got there, my experience, and maybe, I guess, what I've seen some other people have in common about how they got there. And but is it easy? No, it will be the hardest thing you ever do in your life, the most difficult. But is it worth it? Absolutely, and it really is the only way. So you have two choices: to do the inner work, and go through those challenges, and there are moments of bliss. And you see, this is how you stay on the path, because God comes to you and gives you a taste of what it is to be connected to Him, fully. It may be for a few hours, at the times. It may be for a few days. If it may be for a week, it may be for longer, you know. And in that little taste of what it is to be connected to God here on earth is what keeps you motivated on the path. You're like, you can't turn back. You can't turn back once you've experienced it. You can't turn back. So for many who play, oh no, and there are a lot of atheists out there, you know, and people who don't know God and who haven't had that experience. You have to believe other people who've had that experiences. And I'm going to put another video together, the list of people who have had these experiences with all the different religions, as much as I can know. I'm sure there's many people, others that I don't even know about, but to give you at least a really good list, maybe of 50 or 100 people, so that you could maybe do some research on it to get also on your own self, if you wanted to as well, to see that what their paths were, and where they came from, and their experiences, so and hopefully that'll be helpful. But you have to trust people that have been there. I mean, Jesus and Muhammad and Elijah the prophet, the Ari, Haim Vital, all these people, they're not the only ones who have reached these high spiritual levels. Shimon Bar Yochai on the, they're not the only ones. They're not the only ones. In the Catholic, you have Saint Teresa de Avila, you have Saint John of the Cross. Well, you have a lot, Meister Eckhart. There are many people. That's what I'm saying. I will give it a, better, I'm going to really sit down and put a list together. But that's just, some examples, So, that have reached these high level of consciousness. You have the desert ascetics, and things like that. So there are a lot of people throughout history and even today that have gone through this process. And when you have a spiritual awakening, it's kind of like newly awakened, more advanced, more advanced and more advanced, right? So you have different levels after the awakening and with your connection of God. And people aren't perfect. And even those people, they're not perfect. They're still human. And so in some ways still flawed, you know? Much less and every as you go up the levels less and less, but still working on themselves. And so when you understand that humans are never perfect, so I hear this in the news, oh, and they did this and they did it like that and it should have been done like this, it should have been done like that, and oh geez Louise, oh my gosh, I'm just like whatever. That's expecting people to be perfect. Like something should have been executed so perfectly. And I can ask those same people. I mean, I'm like, okay, let me talk to those people. And let's see what you've done. And how perfectly you lived your life. And how perfectly you've executed every single thing. Well, you haven't. I can tell you that right now. You haven't. And to expect other people to be perfect in the execution when everyone is in this process learning and trying to master this human process, this is what I'm saying is that if you were a spiritual person, you would know that everybody was in process at different levels of consciousness and in different, stages of the process of the development of the soul, the psyche, and the mastery of the human experience. Your soul in the body, in the human experience. And the different stages of breaking away of the pre-programming of which your soul first came into this world. I would think they know that. And so some of the things that I read, that's what I'm saying, even reading these spiritual texts, it's like, is that some of the things really don't ever talk about that. And so then I'm wondering if that's why those books are for, like, out of date now. That they were for a previous stage up until now. Now there's a lot of new information coming out that was never before, or if it was such limited people. Limited people had that knowledge. And so maybe, that's what needs to change. To understand, maybe, again, I'm going to say the abuse of power could have been in the editing of, say, the text, and the manipulation of what was done. And when I say editing, it could have been just making some stuff up. You don't know that everything is that he exactly said, because again, the people who like say Jesus or Muhammad, they didn't write it down. They didn't write their teachings down. And when somebody else hears it and then writes it down, that is in of itself a natural error. You're not going to get the exact thing they said. It's not going to go down on paper exactly how they said it. It's only going to go down how that person who's writing it understood it. And if you had 100 people there listening to the same thing he said, you would hear 100 different ways. Kind of maybe the meat of it, most of it, similar. But you're going to hear different interpretations. And we do this even in my first class at Claremont Graduate University. That's the first thing we did in our class. We read a passage in Genesis, and then we were asked to, I guess, write down what we thought we read and what it said, and then we realized that we all filled, we essentially, we heard it, but we filled in the blanks. Some of the stuff it actually didn't say. It wasn't said there. It wasn't said, but your brain fills in the blank. So that's where the psychology and the reading and the spiritual part and your own limited perspective all comes together to interpret information in a certain way. And it's not always right. It's just the way you see it. But that's why it's really good to go and take these classes where everybody gives their opinion and you can talk about it. This is the value where they, in Torah, in the yeshivas that you're supposed to sit around and talk about the Torah, because everybody's going to have a different way of looking at it and interpreting what's said. And so that's why, that's one of the first exercises, just so you know, that, we went around the table, when I was at Claremont Graduate University. I took a class there, and on the women in Genesis. And so you feel it, your brain fills in the blanks. And it fills in the blanks from your own perspective, your own life experience, from what you know. But what you don't know is that someone else doesn't have your life experience. They had a whole different series of them, and they have information, and they fill in the blank their own way. So those are the takeaways, is that people, we have this limited perspective and we only see life and interpret it to our own lens, and sometimes we fill in the blank of what's not, and it may or may not be that way, honestly. So, those are some of the points that I really want to make, is that, maybe the questioning of authority has to come down with the original writing of the books. And have we transcended that? Is that part of the past? Because if we were really low consciousness and destructive up to 1990, like say Dr. Hawkins, let's give him, benefit of the doubt there for those who want to say, oh, well, I don't know how he created it, and I question his methods, and I don't even know what consciousness is, so I don't really know if I believe it, whatever. Let's just, for argument's sake, let's say it was 192 before consciousness level, which means that below 200, that consciousness level is destructive to humanity. So maybe overall, as a world, we were low, and so that's why you had a lot of wars, you had a lot of death, you had a lot of illness, lot destructive to life. But now we've moved into a time that's creative. So maybe those books were a guidance for a time when consciousness overall was destructive to life. And maybe we've outgrown them. You know? And so I would say that my thinking is, maybe going into what we consider the mystical practices of these religions, which in Judaism that would be Kabbalah, in Islam that would be Sufism, Hinduism, Buddhism. And I think Christianity is trying to come up with something in different ways, but Christianity puts such a kibosh on some mysticism for so long that they sort of have left themselves out of the race. However, there have been, different groups trying to sort of, create something, in that place, you know, um, to fill that gap, both in the Catholic Church and in Christianity. And so, and I will look that up because I'm not, I will look that up. I know that I had, let me see. I know that I had, it's not coming to me, integral, let me look it up here real quick. Let me see, because for the Christian thing, let me get one out there. Let's see, Integral Christian Network. That might be, one source for a more mystical approach, that might talk about union, with God, through Jesus Christ, that might be a source. And so I will find, I'm going to do some research more on that. Like I said, when I make a video about all the other mystics and, in the other religions, in the various religions, and then and maybe some books that some people who have maybe are awakened at different levels of consciousness, maybe not, fully, match the full level of consciousness, but really high, I'm going to make a list of that. And then I will also give, different places where, you can go if to, coming for the Sufi mystic, like modern day, Rumi, who of course is no longer alive, but is one of the most, one of the most famous Sufi mystics. And I guess Llewellyn Bounley, and I believe is in California, around the San Francisco area, and he has written a lot of books. If you're interested in the Sufi, and of course there's the Kabbalah Center, and then there is a couple of other organizations that teach Kabbalah as well. I believe Daniel Mack gives a Zohar class that you can register for and take. And he has translated the Zohar, from its original, the original Aramaic and Hebrew, into English. And he gives classes online. And so there are some sources that you can look to. And of course, in Hinduism, there's many sources. There's things online. There is the Self-Realization Center in near Los Angeles. Of course, there are many ashrams in India, and in Buddhism, there are many Buddhist temples, all over. Of course, if you live in around the LA area, there's several that I know of. So there are many sources, and I'll try to put some together, for people to sort of be able to seek something out. There's a lot of things online as well. And so, but I'm also trying to put something, together in my second book. And after I think I really get it done in the second book, I'll start maybe having, courses, myself, or maybe doing some lives, 'cause if people are interested. So, I just wanted to say that maybe, we need to look at, you know, those forces, and maybe we have grown it. Maybe those books apply to the past. Like I said, the prophecy. Like say the prophecies could be real, but if you are following the slow path and are gonna go, move, as Dr. David Hawkins says, without any attempt on your own really to grow spiritually, is that you might move 5 points in every lifetime, but how long is that going to take? Like 1,000 lifetimes, to get from zero to 1,000. So and you could do that and go along with humanity unconscious, bumping around, in the dark for the next 5,000 years. But do you really want to do that? Because you can complete that transformation, connect to God right here, right now, in this lifetime, still being on earth, and become a channel of the light to make this a better world, a more peaceful world. That's how you do it. That's how you do it. Not necessarily, protesting in the streets, and not, whatever. It's through doing the inner work so that you can become a channel of the light. And your vibration will raise the vibration of this earth, and then it will allow other people to then feel it and seek out change, and seek out the spiritual path. And so, but with so many people not believing in God in this day and time, if that is a problem. That is a problem. But those of us who do need to do the inner work, because if we do and they feel it, because this is one of the things the Ram Dass, I took a big takeaway from a video I watched on him, when he spoke about his guru, and he said that when he went to India, and he met the guru, I mean, he could just feel the love, the presence, in the presence of the guru, just feel love, the essence that vibrated out of his beingness was just love, but that love is really God. His connection to God is flowing through him, and that the love that God feels for humanity is flowing through that guru, is flowing through him to you. And so through that you can connect, to God, and you can feel God, and it's amazing. And so what the other side, what happens sometimes is then people get too connected to the guru and think, oh my God, I need to, be with the guru, and or I can't survive without the guru. The point isn't the guru. The point is that guru is a channel for God. The point is God. The point is the creator, divine creator, That's the point. That's what you're really feeling. And so it's so, and the issue that you need, and the thing you most importantly need to understand is that you too can become like the guru, And so that was one thing that Ram Dass is like, I want to be like that. I want to get there. I want, I want to be able to develop myself to be able to have that kind of connection. And that's what we really need to do, to understand each one of us is meant to feel that, to be that. And so that's what I hope is the takeaway from everyone, is that this is it's a very complicated situation, that if you try to use policy and physical world and go back to those texts, you're going to be fighting to the end of time. I mean, that's just to be honest. But the issues, maybe we need to come to a realization that, of how those texts were created, and maybe there's some errors in that, and that maybe we can all leave that behind and go to our mystical, practices like Sufi, like Kabbalah, like Hinduism, Buddhism, and more mystical Christianity, in order to then come into oneness, because God is there for everyone. The universal laws are there, for everyone to live, and God wants everybody to be happy and abundant and love and filled with joy. And that's really what he wants for all of us, but to hate, no. And to really want to kill somebody else, no. You say, oh, well, you get but there is, evil forces out there. Don't get me wrong, and evil is going to exist. But the issue is that you have to transcend it. You have to transcend that within yourself. And that's one of our big goals is to, that we also came here on earth, is to be good despite the evil. So when evil is done to you, that you're still good. You're still good. This doesn't mean you don't protect yourself. It doesn't mean you're naive and don't protect yourself. You can't be naive, and you need to protect yourself. So you need to know that there are going to be people who are going to want to take advantage of you, who might want to hurt you. But the issue is that you don't lose your faith in humanity. In the overall thing, that person is in their process, and they're really low consciousness right now, and they can't see just the beautiful person that they are. They don't see the potentiality of life and all the goodness that this life has to offer. They have somehow, are blocked from it. And they can't see it. They've, from the things that have happened to them, their mind has psychologically, through their own limitation, has processed things in negative ways that blocks them from seeing the beauty of what life is. That has disconnected them from truly experiencing God, and has prevented them from becoming a pure vessel and a channel of divine energy into this world. So you still have to be good. You still have to be good and feel love and understand that everyone is in process. But if you do the work and become a channel light eventually, you can get to the level that will increase the vibration of this earth, and therefore make it easier for even those people who are truly lost and deeply unconscious, that you could say are evil, would be awakened into it. The possibility of a better life, into the life that God actually wanted them to have. And that's what I think that people need to understand. God wants you to live an abundant life, but it comes from the inside and outward, not the other way. But your limited and negative outlook on life has come because we started out low consciousness. Every human being started out low consciousness and had to, through our limited mind, work through the process of being human through our many lifetimes that we've already lived. But some of us got bitter and angry and didn't move on and he didn't heal properly from the trauma and move up through the levels of consciousness and got stuck at these lower levels. And so then that creates a negative outlook on life, and that it creates despair, illness, poverty, and a great deal of suffering. But when you can put that aside for a second and say, no, God wanted me to have a great life. He wanted me to be abundant. I didn't say a billionaire, and I didn't say a millionaire. I'm saying, abundant, happy life, good family, health, wealth, and happiness. He wants that for me, And so how do I get there? And why can't I see it? And how can I, and then look for the teachings that are going to get you there. And look for those teachings, look for the knowledge that's out there. Today, there is tremendous amount. And even the study of psychology, and the understanding the development of the psyche and even all these types of things really didn't start until the late 1800s, you have Adler, Freud, and Jung, who just really started those in-depth teachings, that needs to also go hand in hand with the spiritual teachings, because you have the spiritual teachings, like the pure spiritual aspect, and then there's the physical work, how the brain responds, and kind of like it's a computer network. Your brain is a computer net. How it processes information, how it holds on to things, how it reacts and responds and develops, and how those sorts of things. You need to understand that as well. And so there's like the physical world part, which I think is like the psychology and how the brain works and the psyche works and how you process information. And then there's the spiritual thing, where it's what is a spiritual teaching and how do I get there? So you kind of have to go and work between both of them in order to grow spiritually, in order to master the human process, in order to reach this higher state of consciousness, in order to purify your vessel, to become, to connect to God, and then become a channel for the energy of God into this world. So there's a lot of steps, and the one big thing that I have learned, the last thing I want to say here is this, about working from the inside out. Humans, because of the way we're created, limited, look for things outside of ourselves to bring us that happiness, to bring us that joy, to bring us, the abundance. We look outside of ourselves, you know. But when you connect to God and you feel it, even just for an instant, the energy of the Creator, that it's bliss, pure ecstasy. There's no pain, there's no suffering. It's just joy and happiness and peace all at once. That's where it comes from. And then it goes out. And then your world will reflect it. Your world will reflect it. So, please understand that when you're at these low levels of consciousness and you are hopeless, you feel hopeless, you feel, apathy, you feel like, oh, there's nothing I can do about it. The doing doesn't come outside. That doesn't mean you topple the government. That doesn't mean do, many things, kill people that are against what you think, or in some ways even fight the oppression, because it comes from within. It comes from within. I'm not saying to let other people take advantage of you. That's not what I'm saying. But it's how far you go with that. Make sure that when you're fighting oppression, you don't lose your soul in that process, and you don't suffer a psychotic break. Because when you suffer a psychotic break, you then become a vessel for the negative side. You can say Satan, Satan, right? Or whatever, or demonic energies, And then you can become a vessel for the other side, right? So you have to be careful in that. But most of the work is in. Always remember, God wants the best for me. He wants me to be happy. God loves me. No matter how imperfect I am and no matter what I've done, God is ready to forgive me. And He wants me to clue in that I need to fix myself. And then how do I get there? And then all that will flow. And then when you connect to God, you'll feel it. You'll do the work. Feel it, do the work, feel it, do the work. You know what I'm saying? And then eventually you'll have purified the vessel enough where you become a channel for the light. And then you will make the light better for yourself and for the people around you. And that will change the world, because when your vibration goes up, the world vibration goes up. And if enough of us can get the vibration up, the easier it is. It will, if you get it to a level to even waken up the people who are the most unconscious and evil, to awaken into a better life. This doesn't mean you're going to eliminate it. I just want to be clear. But you can significantly reduce it. And the issues, you can learn how to deal with skills and, in order to maintain, protect yourself and manage it. So this is, and I think that's the whole thing, because God also wants you to know that you still love Him and you still are connected to Him, and you still, haven't, God wants you to hold on to that positive, how can I say, opinion of life, that you think life is good and it's abundant and it's amazing, no matter what happens to you. No matter what happens to you. No matter what happens to you, you need to stay that life is good and abundant, filled with love and amazing things, and has the potentiality to be such an amazing place, no matter what happens to you. No matter what. And you also can't leave your love for God and your desire for God, no matter what happens to you. So that is how I am, I guess, dealing with this process, because I don't really know, like, if you go to that text and this text and that text and who was here first, or we're here now, only wants to be here, or we can't share, or, all these kinds of things, I'm not really sure whether, that there's a, like you say, the solution, a solution that, people would be like, oh, that, like, we're going to be able to cooperate. But yes, cooperation is great. I think understanding that, yes, there are, sometimes there are people who are more powerful than you, who can hurt you. And then you have to make decisions. Do I really want to do that? And how do I manage my life in a way where I can still have prosperity and bliss and happiness and love, in my life outside of that, And I think the real answer is that the real happiness and the real bliss and the real abundance really comes from your connection from God. It really is solely that. But when you feel it, and when you feel it, you're not feeling hopeless. You cannot feel hopeless and have hatred and God be in you. God will not enter a vessel, or essentially a human, who is filled with hate and hopelessness. And the issue is God is saying, in no matter what's going on in your life, you need to stay positive. You need to have know that tomorrow's going to be better, and still have love for one another, no matter what. No matter what happens to you. And I know that's hard. It's real hard. But that's the goal. But if you get mired in the hate, and if you get mired in hopelessness because of what looks on the outside, then you're not really getting it. You know, you're not really getting it, and God is not going to enter that vessel. And I don't care what the sacred text said. You are not going to get the light. You may reincarnate and come back and work in it, and you may reincarnate in the same exact place you just left, into the same circumstances, to until you get it. To say God is good. He wants the best for me. He wants the best from everyone. My family, your family. You know, He wants the best because, for everyone. And so how do we get there? And it starts with each individual person choosing the light. And so choosing to higher consciousness, understanding these lessons. And I think this is there's a lot of information out there. I mean, there is a lot. Like I said, I'm going to do it write it down from my own perspective, but there is a lot out there right now. And so anyway, that's kind of what it's already over an hour, and but that's kind of what I wanted to say about this whole thing, is that about doing the inner work, maybe looking at not maybe, but looking at the mystical practices, Kabbalah, Sufism, Hindu, Buddhism, and like, again, I won't give more, and I on the Christian mystical practices and things like that. So and maybe look at who really wrote it, and did they lie? Did they embellish it? Maybe that's a better word. Maybe they embellished it so that their religious sect, their religious religion, would grow. It's kind of like a marketing campaign. How do I market this so that people will follow me? How do I market this so I get more members? And remember that humans are not perfect. Humans make mistakes. Humans are selfish. So it is very possible and very likely that the person who wrote it was also selfish, who also embellished as a marketing tool, So, so anyway, but so that's kind of what I have to say about, about that. I mean, it's very complicated, and that's, it's just a difficult part, but that's what I'm saying. I just want that to be clear, that God loves everyone, and that in a body, or in a soul that's in a heart filled with hate, and in a body filled with despair and apathy and anger and hatred and shame, God's not going to enter that. I mean, God loves you and He's there, right? But He needs you to remove all that in order for Him to inhabit you. God dwells, so God can dwell in you and through you into this world. So that's my answer to that. Because I couldn't process. I've listened to a lot of people and their opinions and all that, and I'm like, oh geez, like, I don't really, it just does, none of it resonates with me, because I just don't really, that's not really the answer. But I know that everybody has to do the spiritual work, and I had posted a thing on my Facebook, about Sangha Guru saying about that people aren't of sufficient consciousness, and so and I agree with that. People are not of sufficient consciousness of not to go to war. The issue is to learn, how can I get, where am I at? Not be upset when you identify what level you're at, and just say, how do I get from here all the way up to complete my transformation? What do I need to do? And that you don't need to die. You don't need to die to become one with God. You can do that right here on earth. Right here. Right here. You don't need to die. And God wants the best for you and loves everybody. So I just really, that's all I can say. That's really all I can say, is that you don't have to die to be reunited with God. And God loves you and wants the best for you and your family, for every single one of us. The issue is that we need to remove the blocks. that prevent us, and all the hatred and all the apathy and all the self-hatred, our own self-hatred, our own, and break away out of our limited perspective in order to purify our vessel, in order to become a channel of the light. And in that we will find true happiness, fulfillment, and abundance for yourself and those around you that you love the most. The close family members and loved ones that are closest to you. So anyway, I hope if you have questions, please put them in the comments. And I wish high consciousness and spiritual growth to everyone with the ultimate connection to God right here on earth. Thank you.